This organization is useless, man. I need Caitlin to see it. I need her to see that Stephanie White is a terrible coach, that this organization doesn't have her back, that the training staff is useless. Do what Tom Brady did. Go get your own trainer. And actually empower him to say, fuck you to the Indiana Fever. Tom Brady said, if my trainer's not coming with me on the plane, I'm not playing for you guys. I'll go to Tampa.
That's not a highlight. That's someone finally saying the quiet part out loud. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Is the real problem here Caitlin Clark's body? Or is it everyone standing around her making decisions for her?
In the first 10 minutes, Cece plays 3 minutes and 15 seconds. In the second quarter, Cece plays 3 minutes and 51 seconds. Then she gets another stint of 3 minutes and 48 seconds. Then in the third quarter, she plays 2 minutes and 18 seconds.
3 minutes, 15, 3:51, 3:48, 2:18, 3:10. Read that rotation back one more time. 5 separate trips onto the floor and back off it again in one single game. For a player who had barely practiced in nearly 3 weeks. That is not a return-to-play plan. That's a stopwatch drill. You don't rebuild a jump shot's rhythm in 3-minute windows, and you don't get your legs under you sitting on a bench between sprints either. Caitlin Clark said as much herself afterward, that it's hard to find any kind of flow when you're in for 3, out for 3, in for 3 again. But before you lock in on the minutes as the whole story, hold on, because the real question tonight isn't why she played like this on Wednesday. It's who actually decided she should. Indiana hasn't put a single name on that decision publicly. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly whose call that number really was. It might not be the person getting blamed the loudest online right now, and that's going to matter a lot more than the box score.
Caitlin Clark on the short substitution patterns. Clark did not look like her usual self on Wednesday, playing in 2 to 3 minute spurts as a condition of her minutes restriction. Something she said when asked about that, quote, was not my decision. That was somebody else's decision. Quote, it's just really hard when you're playing 3 minutes, sub out, 3 minutes, 3 minutes, then you're on the bench, Clark said. It's really hard to get into a flow. For the most part, I got good looks. Some of them went, some of them didn't. I probably didn't get to have a feel for the game as I usually do. Like, it's just really, really hard for me to play, and that's...
Listen to how carefully she picks her words in that clip. On the record with the Indy Star and ESPN, asked directly about those 3-minute bursts, Clark says twice in the same answer that this was somebody else's decision, not her plan, not her preference. She says it's genuinely hard to find a rhythm, hard to get loose, hard to get a real feel for the game when you're subbed out every 3 minutes. And then, almost in the same breath, she pivots straight back to the company line. My body feels great, she says. That's the positive I can take from today. That's not a contradiction. That's a professional athlete being diplomatic in front of a camera while clearly frustrated behind the scenes. Read between those 2 sentences and you get the entire story of this season in miniature, what Caitlin Clark is allowed to say in a press conference, and what she's actually feeling walking back to the locker room. Every quote she's given since that back injury follows a similar pattern: credit the training staff, credit the plan, and then slip in one honest sentence about how hard the plan actually is to play through. She's threading a needle most 23-year-olds couldn't thread, staying loyal to an organization while being honest that the organization's plan is making her worse in real time. That's not spin, and it's not weakness either. It's what professionalism under pressure actually looks like when the person doing it happens to be 23 years old and carrying an entire league's television ratings on her back at the same time.
Hey, Caitlin, I got to put you on the minute restrictions. Ah, really? Come on, man. I don't want to do minute. Caitlin, trust us. All right, I'll trust you. I need you and Stephanie White to have screaming matches behind the scenes. If they're going to
This is the part that should bother you more than the stat line does. Because somebody else's decision means there was a room, a conversation, people, plural, who looked at the best player in the sport and told her no. And based on everything coming out of Indiana this season, that's not one voice making that call. It's at least 4. There's Stephanie White, running this bench in year 1 with this exact roster. learning the job in real time on national television every night. There's Amber Cox, the team president, building out the business side of what is now the most valuable brand this league has ever had. There's Kelly Krauskopf, the front office executive who's been around this organization longer than almost anyone in the building. And there's Lynn Dunn, the senior advisor whose name, fairly or not, keeps showing up in reporters' notebooks whenever information leaks out before the team wants it to. 4 names, 1 health decision, and from the outside looking in, nobody can actually tell you which one of them has the final say when the room disagrees. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just what an unclear chain of command looks like from the outside. And unclear chains of command are exactly how a superstar ends up getting managed instead of coached. That kind of ambiguity doesn't just confuse fans watching from home. It puts Clark herself in the position of getting different signals from different people in the building depending on who she talks to on a given day, which is its own quiet form of mismanagement.
Damn, Becky Hammond! What did Becky Hammond say? Becky Hammond said, A'ja Wilson wants to play, and I told her no. And you know what A'ja said? You know what, Becky? You're a championship coach. You've led me to the promised land. You did the whole NBA shit. You're friends with Greg Popovich. You were tutored under Greg Popovich. I'll step back and I'll listen to you. Stephanie White ain't that.
Compare that structure to somewhere that's already won a championship. Becky Hammond has a title on her resume in Las Vegas, and by the story that's circulated about her and A'ja Wilson. When Hammond tells her franchise player no, Wilson pushes back, argues her case, and then trusts the call anyway, because Hammond has already proven exactly what she knows how to do with a roster like that. Worth being clear, that's a second-hand account making the rounds, not a transcript, but the dynamic it describes is a real and recognizable one in pro sports. Earned trust between a star and a coach who's actually delivered. Nobody's saying Stephanie White doesn't deserve the chance to build that same kind of trust with Clark eventually. Every coach starts somewhere. But trust like that gets earned with results, not with a title on a business card. And right now, White is asking for the benefit of the doubt before she's had the chance to bank it.
Stephanie White got ran out of Vanderbilt. She couldn't even win at college. Her players quit on her because she's not good. Then she hitches her wagon to bum-ass Alyssa Thomas and DeWanna Bonner, who went to the finals the year before she got there.
And that history is exactly what this show keeps circling back to. Stephanie White's last head coaching job before the WNBA was at Vanderbilt, a stretch that reportedly ended with her out of the position and the program struggling to keep its roster together under her system. To be fair, and this matters, she wasn't walking into Vanderbilt with anything close to WNBA caliber talent or resources, and a rebuild in college basketball is an entirely different job than coaching the most talented roster in the league. Comparing the two directly isn't quite fair either way. But it's also fair to ask the question this show keeps asking every single week. Does a coaching resume like that automatically buy patience and benefit of the doubt when you're now the one making health and playing time decisions for the most scrutinized athlete in the history of women's basketball? Plenty of good coaches have had rough chapters early and gone on to be excellent. That's not being disputed here. What's being disputed is whether the fan base, and Clark herself, are just supposed to assume this works out, with no real evidence yet that it will, while the frustration keeps piling up in real time. White is still in her first season on this bench, and one uneven stretch doesn't erase whatever she goes on to build from here. But give it time is a much harder sell to a fan base watching its franchise player play 3-minute shifts in real time on national television every single week.
I'm not a huge fan of the minutes restrictions. I think they're silly, Clark said pregame Saturday. I told them I don't want to come back unless I'm 100% full go. Why would I be out there to play 20 minutes? I'm out there to win and give everything I have to the team. You just played 16.
And here's Clark, in her own words, weeks before any of this became a full-blown storyline, already telling you exactly where she stands. Minutes restrictions, she said, are silly. She doesn't want to come back at anything less than fully go. Why would she be out there just to play 20 minutes, she asked, when the entire reason she's out there is to win? That's not a podcast host's read on the situation. That is the player herself, on the record disagreeing with this plan before the plan had even fully kicked in. Every restriction that's followed since that quote has happened anyway, in spite of what she said she wanted, which means either the team knows something about her body that she isn't saying publicly, or her voice in that conversation is carrying a lot less weight than it should for someone with her leverage.
Chloe Peterson comes out. A year ago, Caitlin Clark said minutes restrictions were silly, but after a frustrating year of injuries, she knows that it's what she needs to do. This is the quote that she's referencing, actually. I'm seeing some confusion on me saying she knows a minutes restriction is what she needs to do. I was not referring to the 3-minute burst, which she didn't like, but the minutes restriction as a whole. This is her full quote as written in the story on her minutes restriction. Especially when you haven't played for 2.5 weeks. A game environment is just so much different than anything we can replicate.
So here's where it actually gets messy, because the coverage of that quote and the quote itself do not line up the way one report suggested they did. One outlet framed it as Clark now simply accepting that minutes restrictions are what she needs to do. Go back and read her actual words to the Indy Star and ESPN, given after that 106-92 loss out in LA. She says a real game environment is nothing like practice. She says her workouts have gone well and her body's responded. She says she's such a competitor that she genuinely believes she could handle more right now, and that a couple of rough nights inside a long season aren't going to break anything. Nowhere in that full quote does she surrender to the plan the way the headline implied. She's making the case for herself, out loud, on the record, while still being careful enough to say the diplomatic thing about trusting the process. Those are two very different messages, and only one of them made it into the headline that spread the furthest. That's the difference between a nuanced quote and a clean headline. And in a league this hungry for storylines, the clean headline almost always wins the algorithm, even when it loses the facts.
Shout out to Venom. Wait, now we're false reporting? I just read through this entire article, and nowhere did CC say she knows what she needs to do. In fact, it sounds more like she feels great and not tired and ready to play, but it's somebody else's decision. Nice try though, Chloe. As a credentialed reporter, we expect better. To be fair, Venom, I don't expect better, but for many of these people, I don't hold any of these people to a high standard. They're all shills. This is a lie. Is journalistic integrity dead?
So when a headline gets built on a version of a quote that isn't actually sitting there in the article, you're allowed to call that what it is. This show is not accusing anyone of inventing a quote out of thin air. That's a serious charge, and it's not one to throw around loosely. But there is a real, documented gap between what Clark actually said and how it got summarized for a national audience. And the Fever's public relations operation benefits every single time that gap gets read the easy way instead of the accurate one. If you're covering the single biggest draw in the history of this league, a player whose every word moves the conversation for days, the standard for precision should be higher than it is for a random mid-season storyline, not lower. Fans noticed the gap immediately, and when it didn't get corrected, that silence told its own story. Trust in the coverage around this team is already thin, and moments like this are exactly why. Comment sections under that story filled up within hours, with fans posting the actual quote next to the headline side by side. And that kind of instant fact check didn't used to be possible before every fan had a phone and a screenshot button in their pocket.
Casting career. I'm talking about Stephanie Metheny White. She needs to worry about that first-time GM who has never built a roster before. I'm talking about Amber Cross-Eyed Cox. She needs to worry about that president who wants to use her to turn the Indiana Fever into Apple by name recognition, but not become Apple by actually providing a product consumers want. I'm talking about Kelly Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs Kroskov.
Now let's talk about why any of this matters beyond one box score. Caitlin Clark is not just a really good player on this roster. She is the single biggest reason this franchise's valuation, attendance figures, and national television windows look completely different than they did 3 years ago. Every one of these decision makers in that building knows exactly what she's worth to them, and you can hear the ambition in how they talk about it. Turn the Indiana Fever into a brand people buy into the way they buy into Apple, a name that sells itself before you even open the box. That's the comparison being made, and it's not a modest one. But you don't get there by trading on somebody else's fame while mismanaging the actual product on the floor underneath it. BlackBerry had name recognition too, right up until the day it stopped mattering. because the product underneath the name stopped keeping up. If Indiana wants to be the Apple of this league, that takes more than borrowing Caitlin Clark's spotlight. It takes building a coaching staff, a front office, and a chain of command that actually earns the hype instead of just riding it. Right now, with 4 voices in the room and no clear answer on who breaks the tie, this organization is spending its biggest opportunity in franchise history, figuring out its own structure in full public view, on the back of a 23-year-old who never asked to be the test case. That kind of swing in valuation doesn't happen because of one great jump shot. It happens because millions of people who never watched a WNBA game before are now tuning in specifically to watch her. And that attention is a finite, fragile thing that has to be protected, not spent carelessly.
With. So do something about that environment in Indiana, or get the fuck out of there. Do something about that agent you surround yourself with, and get a new one. Fix those conversations with Stephanie White and stop letting her think you're a punk. Again, folks, again, I'm 3 years deep in this.
So who's actually responsible for 3-minute bursts and a superstar publicly biting her tongue in press conferences? Here's the honest answer, and it's a lot less satisfying than pinning it on one villain. It isn't just Stephanie White, and it isn't just the front office either, taken alone. It's a structure where a first-year head coach still learning the job, a team president focused on growing the business, a veteran executive with decades of institutional history, and a senior advisor with her own relationships across the league are all weighing in on the health of one 23-year-old. And nobody outside that building, and maybe nobody fully inside it either, can tell you who actually breaks the tie when they disagree. That ambiguity is the real failure here, not any single person's malice or incompetence. Committees don't make cowards out of people, but they do make it very easy for everyone involved to share the credit when things go right and spread the blame so thin that nobody actually owns a bad call when things go wrong. And the only person in this entire equation who holds real, undeniable leverage over how that gets resolved is Clark herself, by making it unmistakably clear privately, if she wants to keep it there, exactly what she will and will not accept going forward. And holding that line even when it's uncomfortable. She doesn't need a press conference to do that. She needs one hard conversation followed by actually meaning it the next time someone tries to talk her out of it. That's a harder thing to do than posting a cryptic message online or waiting for a reporter to ask the right follow-up question. But it's the only version of this that actually changes anything, instead of just generating another week of headlines.
At this point, we're about to go into year 4. She's just buying her time until her contract's up. Well, then you already know you're leaving anyway. So what are we losing? They're already fucking with your minutes and fucking how they use you and your usage rate and what? They already got Raven Johnson bringing up the ball for you. So what do you got to lose at this point? That's the thing. What do you got to lose at this point? Especially if it's done privately. What do you got to lose?
And here's why the timing on all of this matters more than people are giving it credit for. This is year 4 of Clark's rookie contract, which means whether Indiana wants to admit it publicly or not, the organization is on the clock. Every restricted minute, every unclear answer about who's actually calling the shots, every headline that gets the story slightly wrong, all of it gets weighed quietly by a player who is going to have real, franchise-altering say over her own future in this league sooner than people think. If the coaching staff is already leaning on other guards to bring the ball up and manage the workload around her, that is not a small in-season adjustment to a rotation. That's a franchise quietly rehearsing for a version of its offense that doesn't lean entirely on a player it might not be able to keep fully happy forever. Whether that's through injury management, a trade, or simple leverage once free agency conversations start in earnest. If that sounds dramatic, remember that leverage in this league moves fast once a rookie deal gets closer to running out, and franchises that wait until the last possible year to figure out their relationship with a cornerstone player are usually the ones that end up losing her. Nobody is saying Caitlin Clark is walking out the door tomorrow, and nothing here is stating that as fact. This is exactly where the speculation should be labeled as speculation. But franchises do not get many windows to get a relationship like this right, with a talent like this, and right now, this front office is spending one of those precious windows figuring out its own internal chain of command in full public view, while the player at the center of it keeps saying all the right things to reporters and clearly feeling something very different underneath them. That gap between the public quote and the private reality is the story that actually matters here, more than any single stat line from any single Wednesday night in the middle of a long season.
Still love you, CC. Still love you. But sometimes you gotta, talk to people you love like this. You know what I mean? Sometimes you gotta talk to people like you love like this, right? So if I didn't love you, I don't care. I wouldn't say anything. You know what I mean? Like, insert a random WNBA basketball player. I don't care about him. I don't love him like that. Shout out to Draymond Green. They don't love you like, I don't love him like that. I love you like that. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like the video, hype the video, and subscribe to the channel. That would mean so much.
None of this comes from wanting to see Caitlin Clark fail, and it doesn't come from wanting to see this franchise fall apart either. It comes from watching a genuinely generational talent get managed by committee, while the people around her compete for credit on the good nights and disappear when somebody needs to own a hard call. So here's the actual question worth sitting with after all of this. If you were Caitlin Clark, watching 4 different voices shape decisions about your own body with no clear answer on who's actually in charge, would you keep quietly trusting that process the way she has all season, or would you finally make every one of them say it to your face, in a room with no ambiguity left to hide behind? There's no easy answer to that, and honestly there shouldn't be, because both choices come with real risk for a player who still has to play for this organization tomorrow. Drop your honest answer in the comments below. Tell me which side of that you'd actually take if it was your career on the line. Hit like if you think this front office deserves to be held to the exact same standard as the player who's currently carrying them. And subscribe so you catch it the second there's real movement on any of this.